The roses in Dr. Nova's garden had never looked better. She knelt among the red blooms, her weathered hands gentle as she tended to the soil that had once been scorched by fusion bombs. 150 years had passed since the last weapon, fired on Earth, and nature had reclaimed what humanity's ancestors nearly destroyed. A soft chime echoed from her communication device. Nova wiped dirt from her fingers and answered the call from her research station. Her assistant's voice carried excitement that made her pause. "Doctor, you need to see this immediately. We've detected something impossible." Nova left her garden and walked to the Galactic Communications Array, a massive dish that had spent decades searching empty space for signs of life beyond Earth. The facility buzzed with activity that felt foreign after years of quiet routine. Scientists who usually spent their days cataloging distant stars now gathered around displays showing patterns that made no sense. "What exactly are we looking at?" Nova asked as she studied the data streams flowing across multiple screens. "It's a transmission, Doctor, not natural phenomena, not cosmic background radiation. This is artificial, structured, and it's directed specifically at our solar system." Her assistant pulled up the signal analysis. "The mathematical sequences are too complex to be accidental. Someone is trying to talk to us." Nova felt her heart race. First contact had been humanity's dream for centuries, but after the Titan Wars nearly ended civilization, most people had stopped looking to the stars. They focused on healing their world instead. Can we decode it? We're working on it now. The signal contains multiple data layers: visual, audio, and something else we can't identify yet. Hours passed as the team worked to unlock the alien message. Nova contacted Admiral Stone at the Defense Fleet headquarters, though the military had shrunk to almost nothing over the past century. Most of their ships were used for asteroid mining and deep space exploration rather than warfare. Admiral Stone arrived as the first images began to resolve on the main display. He was an old man who remembered stories his grandfather told about the war years, but he had never seen combat himself. None of them had. The alien face that appeared on screen was unlike anything they had imagined. Delicate features, large eyes, that held intelligence, and something else that made Nova's stomach clench: fear, desperation. The voice that accompanied the image spoke in perfect English, though the accent was strange. "People of Earth, children of Soul, we have found you at last. I am Elder Birch of the Quill Coalition. We represent 7 species from distant stars, and we are dying." The transmission continued with images that made several scientists leave the room. Worlds burning. Ships fleeing through space. Entire civilizations reduced to ash and empty space. "We detected your ancient broadcasts, your military transmissions from centuries past. Stories of great battles, of warriors who never surrendered, of a species that survived when survival seemed impossible. We know you have evolved beyond such things, but we must ask." Elder Birch's voice cracked with emotion. "The Devourers come, for us all. They have destroyed everything in their path for 1,000 years. We are the last, and we are losing." Admiral Stone watched in silence as the aliens showed tactical displays of recent battles. Enemy ships that moved with perfect coordination, strategies that seemed to counter every defensive plan the Coalition developed. The Devourers fought like a single vast mind controlling countless bodies. "We studied your history. Your species fought itself for millennia. You developed weapons that could destroy worlds and tactics that seemed to defy logic. You survived because you were unpredictable, because you never gave up, because you were—" Elder Birch paused, searching for words. "Because you were born for war." The transmission showed the final message coordinates and a desperate plea for help before the signal ended. Nova stared at the blank screen. Around her, the research team sat in stunned silence. They were botanists, philosophers, artists. They built gardens where battlefields once existed. They wrote poetry about peace and composed music that celebrated life. The idea of war was as foreign to them as breathing underwater. "We can't help them," someone whispered. "We don't even have weapons anymore." Admiral Stone spoke for the first time since the message began. "We have weapons, old ones, locked away and forgotten." He stood slowly, his aging frame carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "We also have soldiers, sleeping ones." Nova knew he meant the cryo chambers. Deep beneath several major cities lay thousands of volunteers from the war years, veterans who had agreed to be frozen in case humanity ever faced extinction again. Most people pretended they didn't exist. "Stone, we can't seriously be considering this. We're not warriors anymore. We've evolved past that madness." "Have we?" Stone asked quietly. "Or have we just been lucky enough to avoid testing that theory?" The debate raged for hours. Government officials called emergency sessions. Scientists argued about the validity of the transmission. Philosophers questioned whether humanity had a moral obligation to help strangers who might not even exist. But Elder Birch's words kept echoing in Nova's mind. A species born for war. She thought about her garden, about the peaceful world they had built from the ashes of their violent past. Was it real evolution, or had they simply run out of enemies to fight? 3 days later, another transmission arrived. This one was shorter, more desperate. The Elder Birch, who appeared on screen, looked older, more tired. "The Devourers have found our last stronghold. We have perhaps weeks before they break through our defenses. If humanity still exists, if any trace remains of the warriors we once detected, please respond. We are uploading our coordinates and tactical data. Even if you cannot save us, perhaps you can learn from our mistakes and find a way to stop them before they reach your world." The transmission ended with star charts showing the location of the Quill Coalition's final refuge. It also included something that made Admiral Stone's face go pale: projected paths of Devourer expansion, mathematical models of their growth patterns, and a timeline that showed them reaching human space in less than 50 years. Nova looked at the data and realized that Elder Birch was right about one thing. Whether humanity chose to fight now or wait, the Devourers were coming. The only question was whether they would face them as the peaceful gardeners they had become, or as something far more dangerous that they had tried very hard to forget. "Admiral," Stone made the decision that would change everything. "Contact the cryo-storage facilities. It's time to wake up some old friends." The ice crystals fell away like tears as General Cross opened his eyes for the first time in 130 years. His lungs burned as they filled with air that smelled different from the world he remembered. Cleaner, softer, wrong. Medical. Technicians rushed around his cryopod, checking vital signs and administering stimulants to bring his frozen body back to full function. Cross tried to speak but could only manage a rough whisper. "What's the date?" 387, sir. December 15th. Cross closed his eyes and did the math. He had volunteered for cryo sleep in 2257 after the Treaty of Titan ended the last Great War. The world was exhausted then, sick of fighting, ready to try peace. He and thousands of other veterans had agreed to be frozen as a final insurance policy, just in case. "Why am I awake?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. They had awakened him because peace had failed somehow, because the world needed soldiers again. Admiral Stone entered the medical bay as Cross struggled to sit up. The old admiral looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Cross had seen that expression before, in the eyes of commanders who faced impossible choices. "We have a problem, General. A big one." Stone showed him the alien transmissions, the tactical data, the projections of Devourer expansion. Cross listened without speaking, his mind automatically analyzing the information as he had been trained to do decades ago. Enemy capabilities, friendly assets, terrain advantages, supply lines. The thinking patterns came back like muscle memory. "How many of us did you wake up?" Cross asked when Stone finished the briefing. 3,000 so far. We're bringing back more every day, but the government is fighting us on it. They think we're overreacting." Cross laughed, but there was no humor in it. 3,000 against an enemy that destroyed 7 entire species. He studied the tactical displays again. "Show me what they're calling our current military assets." The numbers made Cross feel old. Humanity had 12 functioning warships, all of them designed for exploration and asteroid mining. Their weapons were primarily for clearing space debris. The defense fleet existed mostly to rescue stranded travelers and conduct search operations. "We're not just outnumbered," Cross said quietly. "We're defenseless. These people you've built your peaceful world around, they have no idea how to fight. That's why we need you, all of you." Cross was interrupted by commotion outside the medical bay. Voices raised in argument, security personnel moving quickly. Stone's communication device buzzed with urgent messages. "What now?" Cross muttered. "Unscheduled. Arrival," Stone said, reading the updates. "Something came through the outer system perimeter 20 minutes ago." They made their way to the command center, where dozens of technicians tracked a small vessel approaching Earth. The ship moved strangely, its trajectory erratic, its energy signature unlike anything in their databases. "It's broadcasting the same mathematical sequences as the original transmission," Dr. Nova reported. "I think it's one of them." The alien ship didn't land so much as crash in a controlled way into the Pacific Ocean. Recovery teams found it 3 hours later, its hull scarred by weapons fire and what looked like bite marks from something enormous. Elder Birch was barely alive when they pulled him from the wreckage. His species was even more fragile in person than the transmissions had suggested. Thin limbs, translucent skin, eyes that seemed too large for his narrow face. Cross had seen many alien life forms in the databases, but this was humanity's first living contact with another intelligent species. The alien spoke in whispered gasps as medical teams worked to stabilize his unusual biology. "Came as fast as possible. Had to warn you directly. They're coming faster than we calculated." Dr. Nova leaned close to translate his weak voice. "He says the Devourers have developed some kind of new propulsion system. They're cutting travel. Time between star systems by 90%. Elder Birch struggled to continue. "Saw your awakening signatures, energy patterns from your cryo facilities. The Devourers have instruments that detect such things across vast distances. They know you're preparing for war." Cross felt ice form in his stomach. "How long do we have?" 10 years, maybe 15 if we're fortunate. They will come here after they finish with my people." The alien showed them visual records from his ship's memory banks. Cross had seen war footage before, but nothing like this. The Devourers moved their fleets like single organisms. Their ships seemed to be alive, growing, and adapting during battle. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They consumed them, turning captured vessels into raw material for new weapons. "Your people," Cross said carefully. "How do you fight?" Elder Birch's large eyes focused on him with effort. "We calculate optimal strategies. We build defensive positions. Using mathematical models, we coordinate our forces through precise communication networks." His voice grew weaker. "None of it works. They adapt to everything we try. Our computers cannot process possibilities fast enough to surprise them." Cross nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand why the aliens had searched for humanity specifically. "You fight like computers because you think like computers. Logical, predictable, efficient." "Yes. Is this not correct? Not against an enemy that can outcompute you." Cross looked at Admiral Stone. "We need to show him something." They brought Elder Birch to the tactical training center where newly awakened veterans were running simulation exercises. The alien watched in fascination as human soldiers made decisions that seemed to violate basic strategic principles. They split their forces when they should concentrate. They retreated when they held advantages. They sacrificed valuable assets for marginal gains. "This makes no sense," Elder Birch whispered. "Your tactics appear random, wasteful. How did such methods achieve victory?" Cross smiled grimly. "That's exactly why they work. Watch this next scenario." The simulation pitted human forces against a computer opponent programmed to think like the Devourers. Logical, adaptive, always choosing optimal solutions. The humans lost the first 3 engagements badly. Then something changed. They started making choices that confused the computer, fake retreats that turned into surprise attacks, feints that became real assaults, sacrificial charges that served no apparent purpose but disrupted enemy coordination. By the 10th engagement, the humans were winning consistently. Elder Birch stared at the results. "The computer cannot predict your actions because your actions are unpredictable, even to yourselves." "Welcome to human warfare," Cross said. "We don't fight smart. We fight dirty, desperate, and stupid. And somehow that works better than being smart." The alien was quiet for a long time, processing this information. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something that hadn't been there before. "Hope. My people uploaded all our tactical knowledge to your systems before I left. Battle formations, weapon specifications, detailed analysis of Devourer capabilities. We thought this would help you develop better strategies." "It will," Cross assured him. "But not the way you think. We'll study everything the Devourers have faced before and make sure we do the opposite." Elder Birch managed something that might have been a smile. "You truly are as dangerous as your ancient broadcast suggested. Will you help us?" Cross looked at Admiral Stone, seeing his own thoughts reflected in the old man's eyes. They both knew what helping would mean. Humanity would have to become something they had spent 150 years trying to forget. They would have to remember how to be monsters. "Yes," Cross said finally, "we'll help. But understand this. Once we start down this path, there's no going back. The humans you've known, the peaceful gardeners and artists, they'll still exist. But they won't be alone anymore. The warriors are waking up, and we remember exactly who we used to be." Captain Fox had never seen a dead world before. The planet that had once been home to 3 billion Quill stretched below his reconnaissance ship like a wound in space. Where cities should have gleamed, only crater fields remained. Where oceans should have reflected starlight, vast machines moved across empty landscapes, harvesting the last traces of organic matter. "Scan complete," his tactical officer reported in a voice that barely stayed steady. "No life signs detected planetside. But Captain, the orbital readings are showing massive energy signatures. Something big is happening up there." Fox adjusted their position to get a better view of what remained of the Quill home system. What he saw made his blood freeze. Hundreds of ships moved in perfect formation around a structure that dwarfed Earth's moon. The vessel, if it could be called that, seemed to be growing as they watched. Smaller ships flew into docking bays and disappeared, their mass somehow incorporated into the larger whole. "That's a Devourer hive ship," Elder Birch said from the communications station. He had insisted on coming despite his injuries, claiming his people's knowledge was essential for the mission. They consumed destroyed civilizations and used the material to expand their fleets. "How many ships are we looking at?" Fox asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. "Approximately 800 combat vessels of various sizes, plus construction and harvesting units. The hive ship itself contains manufacturing capabilities that could produce thousands more given enough raw material." Fox did the math in his head. His reconnaissance force consisted of 12 refitted exploration ships with minimal weapons and untested crews. Most of his people were awakened veterans like himself, but their equipment was civilian grade at best. The mission was supposed to be observation only. Get close enough to gather intelligence and return to Earth with tactical data. But the situation in the system was worse than their worst projections. As they watched, another group of devourer ships emerged from deeper space, herding what looked like refugee vessels toward the hive ship. Fox realized they were witnessing the final act of genocide. "Those are escape ships," Elder Birch whispered. "The last of my people." Fox watched through telescopic displays as the refugee vessels tried to flee. They moved with desperate speed but no coordination. Each ship followed its own escape vector, making them easy targets for the pursuing devourers. The alien warships picked them off methodically, like predators hunting scattered prey. "Captain," his communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving distress signals from the refugee ships. They're asking for assistance." Fox stared at the tactical display. 800 enemy vessels versus 12 human ships. The mathematics were brutal. Even if they revealed their position and tried to help, they would accomplish nothing except adding their own destruction to the tragedy. But as he watched another refugee ship die in brilliant nuclear fire, Fox felt something his peaceful civilization had tried to forget. Rage. Pure, ancient human rage at watching innocents slaughtered by monsters. "All ships, this is Captain Fox. We're changing mission parameters." "Sir?" his second-in-command asked. "Our orders were reconnaissance only." "Orders change," Fox replied. "Plot intercept courses for the lead devourer pursuit group. Maximum acceleration." "Elder." Birch turned to stare at him. "Captain, this is noble but futile. Your ships cannot match their firepower." "Maybe not," Fox agreed. "But we don't have to outfight them. We just have to confuse them long enough for those refugee ships to escape." Fox's ships accelerated toward the battle zone, using every trick the old veterans could remember. They split into irregular formations, varied their engine signatures to confuse sensors, and broadcast false communications to make their force seem larger than it actually was. The Devourer response was immediate and perfectly coordinated. 3 squadrons of enemy ships moved to intercept, their formation optimal for maximum firepower concentration. Fox watched their deployment with grim satisfaction. "Just like the simulations," he murmured. "They're thinking like computers." All ships execute pattern chaos on my mark. Pattern chaos wasn't in any tactical manual. Fox had invented it during the journey to the Quill system based on old stories from the Titan Wars. Instead of maintaining formation, each human ship would operate independently, making random course changes and targeting decisions that served no apparent strategic purpose. "Mark!" The human ships scattered in all directions, their movements so erratic that even Fox wasn't sure what some of his captains were planning. The first ship, commanded by a veteran named Captain Webb, dove straight toward the largest devourer vessel while spinning wildly on 3 axes. The enemy returned fire, but their targeting computers couldn't track the chaotic movement pattern. Webb's ship slammed into the devourer vessel's port side and detonated its entire reactor core in a suicide explosion that vaporized both ships instantly. The remaining devourer formation hesitated for exactly 3 seconds, their hive mind apparently trying to process what had just happened. In those 3 seconds, 2 more human ships executed ramming attacks against vessels that should have easily destroyed them. "They don't understand suicide tactics," Elder Birch said in amazement. "Their species values efficiency above all else. They cannot comprehend deliberately wasteful strategies." Fox's own ship shuddered under enemy fire as he guided it through an attack run that violated every principle of space combat he had ever learned. Instead of trying to outmaneuver the devourers, he flew directly at them while firing at random targets. His weapons couldn't penetrate their shields, but the unpredictable assault pattern disrupted their formation enough for the refugee ships to break free of the trap. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it ended, 9 of Fox's 12 ships were destroyed or crippled. But the surviving Quill refugees had escaped into deep space, carrying with them the genetic legacy of their species. Fox's heavily damaged ship limped away from the battlefield, its hull breached in a dozen places and its crew reduced to half strength. But they had accomplished something impossible. They had faced overwhelming odds and achieved their objective through pure human stubbornness. "Captain," his communications officer called out weakly, "we're receiving a transmission from the Devourer hive ship." The face that appeared on their cracked display screen was unlike anything they had seen before. It seemed to shift and change, as if multiple beings were speaking through a single mouth. When it spoke, the voice carried harmonics that hurt to hear. "Unknown species," the creature said. "Your tactics do not compute. Your losses serve no strategic purpose. Explain your actions." Fox wiped blood from his forehead and smiled at the alien intelligence. "We're human. We don't need reasons to fight. We just need enemies." The connection ended abruptly. Fox suspected the Devourer hive mind was having trouble processing that response. As they began the long journey back to Earth, Fox reviewed the tactical data they had gathered. The Devourers were everything the Quill Coalition had warned them about. Technologically superior, numerically overwhelming, and strategically brilliant. By any logical analysis, they were unbeatable. But Fox had seen something in those final moments of the battle that gave him hope. The Devourers had hesitated. For just a few seconds, their perfect hive mind had been unable to predict human behavior. In those seconds of confusion, impossible things had become possible. "Elder Birch," Fox said as medical teams worked to patch his injuries. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we found the Devourer's weakness." "What weakness?" "You lost 9 ships to destroy 3 of theirs." Fox smiled grimly. "We lost 9 ships and saved a dozen refugee vessels from complete annihilation. Any computer would call that a tactical defeat. But those survivors will rebuild their species someday, and the Devourers will never understand why we thought that was worth dying for." He paused, looking out at the stars where the enemy hive ship continued its harvest of a dead world. The Devourers think like a machine. Perfect logic, optimal efficiency, no wasted actions. But humans? Fox shook his head. "We're beautifully, dangerously insane, and I don't think their computer minds can handle that." Marshal Kane felt the enhancement drugs burning through his modified bloodstream as he prepared for another training session with Earth's newest volunteers. The genetic modifications that had made him a super soldier during the Gene Wars were still active after 140 years of cryo-sleep, though his augmented body needed constant chemical maintenance to function properly. The volunteers gathered in the training facility looked nothing like the soldiers Kane remembered from the old wars. These were artists, scientists, teachers. People who had grown up believing warfare was an ancient madness their species had overcome. Now they were trying to learn how to kill efficiently, and most of them were failing badly. "Tech specialist. Dawn," Kane called out to a young woman struggling with a weapon she had helped design. "Your plasma rifle modifications are excellent. Your shooting technique is terrible." Dawn looked up from the targeting range where her shots had missed every simulated enemy. "I understand the physics perfectly, Marshal. But when I see the target display as a living being, something inside me rebels against pulling the trigger." Kane nodded grimly. It was the same problem affecting half the volunteers. 150 years of peace had bred the killing instinct out of most humans. They could create devastating weapons, but they couldn't use them effectively. "Show me the target display," Kane ordered. Dawn activated the holographic training system, and a perfect replica of a Devourer warrior materialized downrange. The creature stood 3 meters tall, its biomechanical armor gleaming with integrated weapon systems. Multiple sensory organs tracked movement with predatory efficiency. "You see an enemy?" Kane said quietly. "But what you're really seeing is the thing that killed Elder Birch's family, the monster that turned an entire star system into raw material." Every shot you miss means more innocent people die. Dawn raised the rifle again, but her hands still shook slightly. Kane tried a different approach. Forget about killing. Think about protecting. Every refugee ship Captain Fox saved, every Quill child who might survive to rebuild their civilization. Your job isn't to destroy the enemy. Your job is to make sure they can't destroy anyone else. This time, Dawn's shots found their targets. The transformation happening across Earth was unlike anything in human history. Ancient weapons factories came back online, their automated systems remembering production techniques that had been dormant for generations. The Quill Coalition provided technological specifications that human engineers immediately began modifying in ways their alien allies found disturbing. These are terraforming tools, Elder Birch protested as he reviewed the latest weapon designs. They're meant to reshape planets for colonization. And now they reshape planets for destruction, General Cross replied without apology. Your people think in terms of creation and preservation. We think in terms of winning. The first major test came when Devourer scouts appeared at the edge of the solar system. Long-range sensors detected 3 ships conducting what appeared to be reconnaissance sweeps. Admiral Stone authorized Marshal Kane to lead an intercept mission using humanity's new hybrid technology. Kane's strike force consisted of 50 ships crewed by awakened veterans and trained volunteers. Their vessels looked nothing like traditional warships. Instead of smooth hulls and symmetrical designs, they resembled mechanical predators, all angles and weapon ports and engine clusters that seemed to defy engineering logic. Contact in 30 seconds, reported the sensor operator aboard Kane's flagship. 3 enemy vessels, identical configuration to the ships Captain Fox encountered. All ships, maintain silence until we're inside their sensor envelope, Kane ordered. Remember, we want them to detect us. We want them to think they understand what we are. The Devourer ships responded exactly as predicted. They moved into optimal combat formation, their targeting systems calculating firing solutions based on standard tactics from hundreds of conquered species. Kane waited until they began charging their weapons. Execute Pandemonium Protocol. Every human ship began broadcasting contradictory sensor signatures, false energy readings, multiple heat sources, weapon locks that appeared and disappeared randomly. The effect was like 50 ships suddenly becoming 500, all moving in impossible directions at once. The Devourers fired at targets that didn't exist, maneuvered to counter formations that were already changing, and attempted to coordinate responses to attacks that came from completely unexpected vectors. Their perfect hive mind intelligence, designed to process vast amounts of tactical data instantly, became their weakness when that data was deliberately meaningless. Kane's ships struck like a pack of wolves, each vessel operating independently, but somehow coordinating their assault in ways that defied military doctrine. They used their own ships as shields, sacrificed valuable equipment for marginal advantages, and employed tactics that would have been considered criminally wasteful in any previous conflict. The battle ended in 4 minutes with all 3 Devourer ships destroyed and 0 human casualties. But Kane knew the real victory wasn't tactical. As he reviewed the combat recordings, he could see the exact moment when the Devourer hive mind had lost its ability to predict human behavior. For nearly 30 seconds, their ships had simply stopped firing, their targeting computers overwhelmed by contradictory data. Send the recordings to all training facilities, Kane ordered. Every human soldier needs to see this. The enemy's greatest strength is also their critical vulnerability. News of the victory spread across Earth in hours. For the first time since the alien transmission, people began to believe they might actually survive the coming war. Recruitment centers that had struggled to find volunteers were suddenly overwhelmed with applications, but not everyone celebrated. Dr. Nova watched the combat footage with growing unease. She had spent her entire life studying peaceful civilizations, and what she saw in the battle recordings terrified her more than the Devourers themselves. "We're becoming monsters," she told Admiral Stone during an emergency council meeting. Look at those tactics. We're not fighting like soldiers. We're fighting like rabid animals. And it's working, Stone replied. The Devourers have conquered hundreds of species using logic and efficiency, but they've never faced an enemy that weaponizes chaos itself. At what cost? I've seen the psychological evaluations of our volunteers. They're losing their capacity for empathy, for civilian life. We're creating a generation of humans who only know how to destroy. General Cross spoke from across the table, his voice carrying the weight of terrible experience. Doctor, in the old wars, we learned a hard truth. You can't defeat monsters by remaining civilized. Sometimes you have to become something worse than your enemy. And if we win, what happens to humanity then? Do we just turn off the warrior instinct we're cultivating? Do we pretend we haven't fundamentally changed what our species is? Cross was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. During the Titan Wars, we told ourselves we were fighting for peace, for a future where our children wouldn't have to be soldiers. But after the fighting stopped, some of us couldn't adjust. That's why we volunteered for cryo-sleep. We were too dangerous for the world we had helped create. Tech specialist Dawn interrupted their debate with an urgent report. Long-range sensors are detecting massive movement in the Devourer territories. It looks like they're consolidating their forces for a major offensive. The tactical display showed enemy fleet movements on a scale that dwarfed their previous encounters, thousands of ships converging from multiple star systems, all heading toward human space. How long? Admiral Stone asked. At current speed, they'll reach our outer colonies in 18 months. Kane studied the enemy formations and felt a cold certainty settle in his augmented bones. This isn't a probing attack or a conquest fleet. This is an extermination force. They're coming to destroy us completely. Can we stop them? Dawn asked. Kane looked around the room at the faces of people who had never wanted to be warriors, who had been forced into a war they didn't choose against an enemy that showed no mercy. Yes, he said finally, but not by being the humans we used to be. We have to become something new, something the galaxy has never seen before. He paused, weighing his next words carefully. We have to become humanity's final weapon. Outside the council chamber, Earth continued its transformation. Factories that had built gardens now manufactured bombs. Scientists who had studied life now perfected methods of death. Artists created propaganda that turned peaceful citizens into willing soldiers. The humans were remembering how to be dangerous, and across the galaxy, an ancient hive mind was beginning to understand that it had awakened something that should have stayed asleep. Fleet Admiral Stone stood before the largest tactical display ever constructed, watching red dots that represented the complete military might of humanity spread across 17 different star systems. Each dot was a ship crewed by volunteers, who had never expected to die in battle, commanded by veterans who had never expected to wake from cryo-sleep, carrying weapons that had never been designed for the war they were about to fight. The enemy force showed as a single massive cluster, moving toward human space like a plague across the stars. Intelligence estimates suggested over 10,000 Devourer vessels, supported by hive ships that could manufacture replacement forces during battle. By every conventional analysis, humanity faced certain extinction. Final communications check, Stone ordered. All fleet commanders confirm readiness. The responses came from across known space. General Cross leading the assault on the primary manufacturing worlds. Marshal Kane commanding the Phoenix Corps for the direct strike on Overmind Central. Captain Fox recovered from his injuries and given command of the diversionary fleets that would spread enemy forces across multiple battlegrounds. Admiral, Tech Specialist Dawn reported from her position at the weapons control station, the artificial singularity device is armed and ready for transport, though I still think using it is completely insane. Stone smiled grimly. Dawn, if we were sane, we wouldn't be human. The plan was madness by any rational standard. simultaneous attacks on 17 targets, spreading humanity's limited forces so thin that none of the individual battles could be won by conventional tactics. The strategy only made sense if you understood that humans didn't fight conventional battles. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Stone. In 10 minutes, we begin the largest military operation in human history. We're not fighting for victory in any traditional sense. We're fighting to prove that some things cannot be computed, cannot be predicted, and cannot be stopped by perfect logic. Stone paused, looking at the faces around him. Scientists who had become soldiers, artists who had learned to kill, children who had never known war but were willing to die in one. The Devourers think they understand us now. They've analyzed our tactics, studied our psychology, adapted their strategies to counter our unpredictability. What they don't realize is that humans don't just think outside the box. When necessary, we burn the box and build something entirely new from the ashes. The countdown reached 0, and across 17 star systems, humanity struck simultaneously at the Devourer manufacturing hub in the Rigel system. General Cross led 300 ships in what appeared to be a suicide assault against impossible odds. The enemy had fortified the system with orbital weapons platforms and defensive fleets that should have destroyed any attacking force within minutes. Cross's ships flew directly into the kill zone without evasive maneuvers, broadcasting surrender signals while simultaneously launching every weapon they carried. The Devourers, programmed to accept surrenders efficiently, hesitated for crucial seconds while trying to process the contradictory signals. In those seconds, Cross's ships released clouds of nanoscale weapons disguised as surrender beacons. By the time the hive mind realized the deception, the manufacturing facilities were already consuming themselves from within. Meanwhile, in the Vega system, Captain Fox commanded a fleet that fought an entire battle using only mining equipment and civilian vessels. His ships moved like asteroids, powered down and drifting, until they were close enough to deploy industrial cutting tools against enemy hulls. The Devourers had never faced an enemy that used construction equipment as weapons of war. But the real battle was happening at Overmind Central, the massive nexus that coordinated the Devourer hive mind across thousands of light years. Marshal Kane led the Phoenix Corps, humanity's most elite unit, in a direct assault against the heart of enemy territory. The Overmind facility was larger than Earth's moon, protected by defensive systems that had never been breached in 1,000 years of warfare. Hundreds of thousands of Devourer ships patrolled the surrounding space in formations that created overlapping fields of fire covering every possible approach vector. Kane's force consisted of exactly 50 ships and 3,000 volunteers, who had undergone genetic modifications similar to his own. They were no longer entirely human, their minds and bodies enhanced to operate beyond normal biological limits. They were humanity's final evolution, purpose-built for war. Phoenix Corps, initiate terminal protocol, Kane commanded as his ships approached the outer defensive perimeter. What happened next violated every principle of space combat ever developed. Instead of trying to break through the enemy defenses, Kane's ships began deliberately crashing into them, but these weren't simple ramming attacks. Each ship contained a modified human crew whose enhanced nervous systems could function even while their vessel was being destroyed. As Phoenix Corps vessels slammed into Devourer defensive platforms, their crews transferred to the enemy structures and began sabotaging them from within. Enhanced humans fought their way through corridors designed for different species, their modified bodies adapting to alien environments that should have killed them instantly. The Overmind's response was perfect by conventional standards. It sealed, compromised sections, deployed internal security forces, and calculated optimal countermeasures for each type of human intrusion. But the humans weren't following any logical pattern. They destroyed critical systems while ignoring more valuable targets. They sacrificed themselves to create minor damage that served no apparent tactical purpose. Kane himself led the final assault on the Overmind's Central Processing Core. His team of 30 enhanced soldiers fought through kilometers of defended corridors, leaving a trail of destruction that seemed random to outside observers. But Kane understood the true pattern. They weren't trying to destroy the Overmind through direct attack. They were introducing chaos into a system that depended on perfect order. The chamber containing Overmind Central was vast beyond comprehension, filled with processing nodes that pulsed with the collective thoughts of the Devourer species. Kane stood before the central intelligence that had orchestrated the destruction of countless civilizations and felt no hatred, no anger. Only grim satisfaction at a job nearly finished. "I am Overmind Central," the intelligence spoke through speakers that vibrated with harmonic frequencies. "Your assault has failed. My defensive systems have adapted to your chaotic tactics. You cannot surprise me again." Kane smiled as he activated the artificial singularity device Dawn had designed. "You're right. We can't surprise you anymore. But we don't need to." "Explain." "You've been studying us, learning our patterns, adapting your strategies. What you haven't realized is that we've been studying you too. We know exactly how your hive mind processes information, how it makes decisions, how it maintains control over your entire species." Kane armed the singularity device, a weapon that would create a miniature black hole in the heart of the Overmind facility. The thing about perfect systems is that they're perfectly vulnerable to the right kind of interference. You will destroy yourself along with this facility. Yes, that's the point you never understood about humans. We're willing to lose everything to win. The Overmind paused, its vast intelligence apparently processing this statement. "Your logic is flawed. Victory without survival is meaningless." Kane laughed as the device reached final activation sequence. "See, that's why you lost this war before it started. You think survival is the point. But sometimes, Overmind, the point is making sure the monsters don't win." The artificial singularity activated, creating a gravitational anomaly that began consuming the Overmind facility from within. But Kane had timed it perfectly. The gravitational distortion interfaced with the Overmind's quantum processing systems, creating a cascade failure that spread through the entire Devourer network faster than light. Across the galaxy, Devourer ships suddenly lost coordination. Their perfect hive mind intelligence fragmented into millions of individual nodes, each trying to process the impossible data streams caused by the Singularity's interaction with their quantum communication network. Fleet Admiral Stone watched from the command center as enemy formations across 17 star systems began falling apart. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly flew into each other. Weapons that had fired with mathematical precision began targeting friendly vessels. The Devourer fleet, deprived of their central intelligence, became a chaotic mass of individual ships with no shared purpose. "All human forces, execute final phase," Stone commanded. "Show them what happens when you wake up humanity." The scattered human fleets converged on the confused enemy vessels like predators sensing wounded prey. But they didn't fight like soldiers anymore. They fought like something primal and terrible that had been sleeping in human DNA for thousands of years. The careful tactical training was abandoned in favor of pure aggressive instinct. Ships rammed enemy vessels not for tactical advantage, but for the simple satisfaction of destroying something that threatened their species. Crews boarded Devourer vessels and fought hand-to-hand in corridors, using weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat as clubs and spears. Humans who had been teachers and scientists and artists became warriors in the most primitive sense. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was completely destroyed, their surviving ships fleeing into deep space with no coordination or shared purpose. The hive mind that had conquered hundreds of civilizations was broken, reduced to scattered fragments that would never again pose a threat to anyone. But the victory came at a price that Admiral Stone was only beginning to understand. As he read the casualty reports and damage assessments, he realized that humanity had won by becoming something fundamentally different. The peaceful species that had built gardens on the ruins of ancient battlefields was gone, replaced by something that knew how to survive in a hostile universe. Tech specialist Dawn approached his command station, her face bearing scars from the battle, but her eyes bright with the satisfaction of victory. "Admiral, we're receiving communication requests from 47 different alien species. They all want to establish diplomatic relations." "What kind of relations?" Dawn smiled, and Stone noticed it wasn't entirely a pleasant expression. "Some want alliances, some want protection, and some want to make sure we never consider them enemies." Stone nodded slowly. The galaxy had learned what humanity was capable of when threatened. The question now was what humanity would become when it no longer had enemies to fight. "Open a channel to all human fleets," he ordered. "It's time to go home and figure out what we are now." As Earth appeared on the main display, growing larger, as their ships approached, Stone wondered if the peaceful world they had left still existed, or if it too had been consumed by the war they had been forced to fight. The humans were coming home, but they were no longer the same species that had left. They were the Warborn, and the galaxy would never be the same.